9. I'll start. Cool.
Cool. Okay, so we've got those sausages that go. Just so we're laughing, kind of thing.
Good evening and welcome to the Fireside Chats. It is a beautiful, beautiful evening here, and apologies for the delay.
Really?
There was a delay, slight one.
So it's my fault. Blame me.
Well, Mark accepts responsibility for being a few minutes late, so thank you, Mark. I do.
And everything else, the signals, puncture that Alex had, everything. I'll take full responsibility.
That's kind of you.
How was your day, Scott?
It was very good. A relaxing day. Not huge amounts of the regular excitement, but a few smaller sightings, some really interesting ones. A big thank you to, I think it's Jeffrey in Texas for finding out the name of that bug that I thought was a kind of cicada, and it was an emerald?
Jewel beetle.
Jewel beetle. And really, really pretty, so thanks for finding that out for us. And little things like that were the highlights of my day.
It's one of my favourite beetles.
I said you would know what it was.
Yeah. I've got one. I've got to try it. It is so hard to find emerald jewel beetles nowadays. Do you know how old it is?
I have no idea.
You know, the jewel beetles are probably some of the oldest beetles. They live in dead wood for sometimes up to 40, 45 years.
Really?
Yeah, as larvae.
So they could have possibly living in the dead marula on which we saw them mating?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, it's one of their host species, the jewel beetles and the longhorn beetles and the click beetles.
Okay.
Some of the beetles that live for some of the longest times ever, because their larvae just take so much time to grow. And perhaps some of the most amazing beetles are the jewel beetles, and they're called jewel beetles. You can see why. I mean, those metallic colours, you can't reproduce that.
Yeah, it was really incredible, and we got lucky. There was some beautiful afternoon sunlights on them, so.
Yeah. And they were mating.
They were mating. Couldn't believe it.
And you saw that.
We saw that. So I even took a few photos
that's
with my
even
camera.
more amazing that you actually found that.
It is. We watched them for a while until it got a little bit awkward, and we thought we should leave them alone.
Okay, yeah, I can understand that. But you're getting to be quite the spotter for the small things with those baby chameleons.
You have to be, because there's not always the big stars of the show around, as you well know.
No, I do. That's also true. I'm getting jealous because you're finding more of the little things than me.
Well, as a team, it works out because you know what the things are that I'm finding, so it works out quite well.
That's true. You also had quite amazingly that golden orb, and it's not so much that you had the golden orb, but because that golden orb was so big, and most of them right now are really, really tiny, and they're still growing. And you found one that's actually quite large. It was almost, looked like it was a sort of quite big on your hand.
Yeah, it was. It was. Yeah, they don't. I mean, they get a little bit bigger, obviously, but
they're going to get huge by the end of the summer. But I mean, right now they're still babies because they're a kind of spider that only lives for one season, and then when they die off, they leave their egg case, and the egg case hatches into 500 tiny little pinprick-sized little red spiders, and they've only just started growing since about September, October. So most of them have got very low webs that are only about this big, and the spider is only really about half an inch to maybe 3/4 of an inch. But you found one that was actually quite big.
I did mention that it may have put its web in a highly lucrative spot, because it is, like you say, way ahead of the others in terms of growth.
But that's the thing about spiders, reptiles, and a lot of things, is that growth is not really set to a particular age, like mammals and things age. When it comes to things that have to eat to grow, spiders and reptiles, the size that they take on is somewhat determined by genetics, but it's also determined by how much they're eating and how much, or how frequently they're able to eat. So
how lucky they are when it comes to catching their prey.
That's right, very much so. But it's just good. It's promising for going into the later period of summer for the next couple of weeks, getting into sort of the really nitty-gritty of summer, and maybe being able to find things, because in the beginning of summer we haven't really had, in terms of insects that have to grow throughout summer to actually start seeing them at the end of summer. Insects and spiders, especially like some of the bark spiders, we're only starting to see them coming out now.
Exactly.
Because they're only starting to become adult now, and they just get so hidden as youngsters that, well,
you don't even know they're around.
Now. Yeah. No, wait, we're still going to be driving out. By the end of January, we'll still be driving around with a stick because of all the spider webs that you have to stop the cameraman from shrieking about.
Big spider.
Well, you're just a bunch of arachnophobes.
Well, Brian, after he did let out a small shriek when it landed on the vehicle, a small one, loud, short but loud, he did end up holding it, so he did overcome a big fear of his.
I'm proud of you, Brian. I really am, because
so he took a big step in the right direction.
Sure, we just now got to get Veer to do the same thing.
Exactly. Okay, well, let's get some questions going, folks, and just to let you know, to ask questions, you would hashtag Safari Live on Twitter, or questions@wildearth.tv on email, and Alex is in the final control. We'll get those questions through to us. While I'm waiting for Alex's question,
I was going to ask, are you going to do something with those?
It's time for the little beef sausages.
Yeah, we don't have boerewors tonight. Boerewors is slightly different. These are beef sausages. I mean, I guess there's a subtle difference to what goes inside them. But with boerewors, it's one continuous long stream of sausage, whereas sausages are sort of twisted off and nipped to make sausage type things. But last week we had boerewors, tonight we're having beef sausage. But you can't let a fire go by without cooking something on it, and I guess this is our hors d'oeuvre before we get back to Manuleti tonight to have a really good dinner. Oops. Waka waka. Down. We've had a really good week. We've had a really amazing week this week. We've had a great activity with male lion. I don't know, I can't remember which of the males did you catch up with?
Well, it was apparently the Salati males in the end. There was a bit of confusion whether it was the Matimbas or the Salatis, but I ended up seeing 2 of the Salatis, which was great.
They were, yeah.
And then also 2 of the Matimbas. So 2 of the main dominant coalitions or fully grown lions, which was great to see in a very short space of time. And interestingly, when the Salati males who come from further north than here, when they heard one of the Matimba males vocalizing, they got up and headed in the opposite direction, so obviously not interested in any confrontation.
Yeah. That is interesting, because those Matimbas are bigger than they are.
Yeah.
But they certainly weren't shy about chasing those Birmingham boys away, because of course the Birmingham boys are much younger males.
Yeah.
That was very interesting. I caught the tail end of that the other day when those 2 Salati males came in and they chased those 3 Birmingham boys all the way back to Arathusa, and for the last few days there have been 4 of those Birmingham boys together. You got to see them?
Yeah.
I didn't, unfortunately. They were off of Arathusa Safari today now, and they're in Shirley's property, so we couldn't get to see them today,
so they've moved
unfortunately.
further west.
But just interesting how that coalition is changing from 3 to 4 to 5. The boys are leaving and maybe trying to find a little spot of their own and leaving the coalition.
Yeah, I wonder. It would be very interesting. Well, it will be interesting to monitor over the next few months what happens. But
it would, and I guess I'm sure the guides will be able to.
Yeah.
Fill us in on that.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
But we had some wonderful times with those Salatis, not only driving home. The other night, just after they left this area, they headed north back into Manuleti, and you were lucky enough to get past them fairly early. I
took a half cab on the first night, but then last night we got stuck behind them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
Sorry, let me just interrupt you quickly, Mark.
Okay.
Let's just get one question going, because there are lots of people out there hoping to get their question answered. So
okay.
Sorry to cut you short. Alex, you could just go again with the name, but I know whoever it was from Texas. And the question that has been asked is, are there any completely wild places left in South Africa that are not natural parks or that are not privately owned pieces of land? And it is a good question. I would say the direct answer to that is no. There aren't any untouched wild places in South Africa that are unaffected by human beings, unless they are fenced in and either national parks or privately owned.
Or game reserves.
Yeah.
If they're not privately owned, they're government owned, and if they're government owned, they're either declared as a national park or a game reserve, or or homeland.
Yeah. So no, in South Africa, there aren't wild areas. You'd have to go to other areas of Africa to still find areas that exist with where wild animals are still coexisting with tribes, for example, in Kenya and Tanzania. Those are two examples that come to mind.
Central Congo, sort of along the Congo River, sort of that whole Congo basin, perhaps, going up into West Africa too. But
so yeah, a lot of the less developed African countries still do have areas which are unfenced, and wild animals still exist there, and interaction between humans often existing as they did hundreds of years ago, still in traditional clothing and living as they did many years ago.
Yeah.
You still do find those places, but in South Africa that is very rare, or it doesn't exist.
I can't think of anywhere. I mean, we might be wrong. There might be, and we'd be open to anybody suggesting an area that they think that is a possible area that is neither declared government land or it still has its natural biodiversity. I don't think in South Africa, I don't think in any of the southern African countries. In fact, I think only sort of really more towards Central and West Africa and some East African countries where you have like the whole Maasai steppe. In fact, that northern Tanzania, southern Kenya area where we both spend time, that whole Maasai steppe with the Maasai land is where the Maasai still live amongst natural indigenous populations of wildlife, and they move their cattle through the wildlife areas. And in fact, they've become so much part of the environment that the wildlife regards them as part of the environment, and wildlife reacts differently to the indigenous people as it does to perhaps intruders or Western people or people coming in who are not part of the local tribal way of life, because that kind of way of life just tends to become part of the environment. It becomes so second nature to everything. And there have been some good examples of how elephant react or lion react to things like that. No, even more importantly, buffalo.
Yeah.
To some extent, how buffalo know that when they see certain humans in a particular attire that is different to the Maasai, that is different to the indigenous people that they live with, that their lives are in danger, yet they're not in danger with the local indigenous people who have cattle and who are peaceful and non-threatening.
Yeah.
I also heard
a small branch cracking, it sounds like. It was
or
quite
horns.
far away, do you agree? Or horns.
Two horns.
Or horns.
Or two tusks clashing.
Well, for now the coast is clear.
But
that was a great question, and it is important to know if people are planning to do safaris, depending on whether you're wanting to experience just a game viewing experience or if you would like to experience real, raw cultural experiences. There are certain countries that offer better cultural experiences tied in with the safari experience than South Africa might do. And that's obviously not playing down South Africa, but it is important to realize that every different country and every different park that you go to will have certain things that make a difference and possibly better than another, depending on what you're looking for. So
there are a lot of, one thing that I found about East Africa is there are a number of lodges and there are a number of places that you can visit that do have cultural experiences, but not only that they are tied to the local villages where all the staff come from. And we've experienced it a little bit here at Djuma, probably more so than any other place that I know. Well, Londolozi maybe, but there are here at Djuma we've supported the local communities up in Dixie and Utah, and very much the local communities where the staff have come from that have worked here at Djuma, and for us at WildEarth, speaking of Rex and Tamani and Patrick Gumedi and the staff of Djuma. But up in East Africa, there are whole communities that are benefiting from this. Their village members working in the national parks that border the village communities, and the lodges encouraging people who come and visit those lodges to go into the local communities where these people are sponsoring schools, they're sponsoring books and stationery and desks and even the buildings themselves, because a lot of rural schools might just be sort of a few rocks under a tree, believe it or not. But a wonderful thing is that we both spent time in the Chulu Hills, and you know about that clinic. I mean, there was an American foundation that sponsored clinics in some of the most remote areas of Maasai land, and they're probably some of the most up-to-date laboratories and clinics that are helping bring medicine and help to people that are living in such rural and urban areas.
Brian, would you mind turning up my volume on my earpiece a little bit, please? Sorry, Alex, go again with that question. My volume was just a little bit down.
So you can't really, I suppose, get to come on safari without having that. I think you would only have half an experience if you were having a safari experience and not in at least engaging in a cross-cultural experience with local people. And is one of the things that is actually helping a lot in local communities, fund schools and fund clinics and fund a greater awareness for the wildlife, because I think to a large extent a lot of the communities that live on the fringes of wildlife areas, they haven't really benefited much. They've always sort of seen them as elite Western areas where people come and pay a lot of money to view game, but they don't benefit from it. And now for the first time, the people that are actually running the camps and working in these areas, their villages are benefiting directly, whether it's donations of seed and farming material and water pumps and schools. It doesn't really matter what it is, but it's only through tourism that we're able to benefit the local communities, and for these communities to see the benefit of tourism as opposed to the wild bushmeat trade and poaching, and unfortunately the decimation of wildlife, which does happen in some areas where the civil war and perhaps extremism takes hold.
Yeah, I agree. But now we are going to be changing the subject swiftly. Not that it wasn't a good one, but there's an extremely important question that a lot of people have been asking.
I was hoping
and it's a question that I think Mark will be able to answer better than I will, because he was across on Arathusa this afternoon, so on their radio network. And people are asking Mark whether there are any updates on Shadow's cub, if she's been seen.
I wish I could answer
the hyena.
That. Yes,
okay.
Since the hyena in the tree. The only thing that I can say is that when I found Shadow, I was desperately trying to get through to the guys in Arathusa to say, look, I found her, because I could hear they were talking about her tracks, and that they were talking. I don't know if it was the same tracks or the same set of tracks, or if it was in any relation to the tracks that led up to where she was. I think there were a couple of guys that might have been a little bit upset because they'd spent the morning tracking her, and then just Wiem and I stumbled upon her. Actually, Wiem did. I didn't. I was driving and Wiem found her. It was.
Oh, well done, Wiem.
It was so classic. You must have experienced it, where you're driving along and suddenly there's a leopard and you're looking for the leopard over there. Meanwhile, it's like right next to the vehicle. And the sort of tunnel vision that you have, because all you want to see is maybe an ear or a spot or something from about 10 to infinity meters away. You're not expecting anything from
so
0 to 10 meters away. And anyways, we arrived at the airstrip, and there were 3 Egyptian geese standing on the airstrip, and I was thinking, if they're not at the pond, which is that Buffalo Dam under Buffalo Pan, if they're not at the pan and they're standing on the airstrip, there's got to be a predator or something. And I was hoping to see one of those long-legged spotted things that run very fast.
Yeah.
And the next minute, Wiem said, there's a leopard, and I turned around and I looked, and I couldn't see her because I was looking above her, and she wasn't even camouflaged. I mean, how do you not spot orange and black spots
in the green
grass? But yes, it was wonderful. We had a really, really nice time with her. But having said that, I was in touch with the guys that had been tracking her. There was talk of finding female tracks with the cub. I don't know if it was in conjunction with the direction she had been walking, and whether we'll find that out tomorrow. But she didn't have the cub this morning, and she was clearly hunting, and that is probably the reason why she didn't have the cub, because she was going through some really thick bush. She was trying very hard to make sure that she wasn't really seen and no alarms were given. And shortly after we left her, she was actually stalking some nyala.
Okay.
So that makes sense why the cub wasn't with her, and I'm sure I hope the cub is still fine.
I did hear a few days back when I was there, I think 2 days after the incident where she was in the tree, and they did have tracks of both an adult and a cub, so in all likelihood Shadow and her cubs. So, and what's also important, to mention, and I did mention, but I'll mention it again, is that it wouldn't have been the first time that leopard cub has spent a long time up a tree with hyena below. 90% of the time, hyena will locate a leopard's kill, and therefore the same scenario will unfold.
I think so. In fact, I heard one of the guides when we were sitting at the sighting. Just by the way, can you hear that Scops? That is Scops owl. I think it might be my owl. That's who, by the way, calling. You can hear my voice. That's why it's coming sitting close. I raised an owl here.
Oh really?
Little Scops.
That must have been so
It
awesome.
was, and I had it on FireSide chat.
You're joking?
Yeah. But it got big and flew away.
That's awesome.
That's who there. I recognize its voice after 5 years. But when I was at the sighting with the cub up the tree, I actually heard one of the guys saying that the longest that they'd seen the cub stuck up a tree was about 4 days. So I think as long as it had a kill, it would have just toileted from up there, would have been fine. And somehow she managed to, I hope that it all went well, but they must have lost concentration, and somehow she got the cub out of the tree and they got away. You got your ear to your head, your hand to your ear.
Okay, well, I think we're done with that question, and I've just got a question through from Katie in Michigan. Good evening, Katie, and welcome to the Fireside Chats. Katie is asking what I did before I started with WildEarth, and I took a holiday, about a 3-4 month holiday, and moved back. In that period I moved back from East Africa to South Africa, so I'd spent 2 years in Kenya and Tanzania, the majority of the time in Kenya and about 6 months in Tanzania. And yeah, I got back to South Africa in about August. I had 2 friends getting married so over a short period of time, so I came back to their weddings and decided to stay on in South Africa for various reasons. And funnily enough, just a friend of mine was speaking to another friend, also an ex-guide, 2 ex-guides that are still in the industry but no longer working for lodges. One of them heard that there was this job going and put me in touch with Graham, and the rest is history. So I got really lucky. It was the first job opportunity that popped up, and I didn't really find it, it found me, and everything went well. So very fortunate to have ended up here, and I've loved every second of it. What I'm going to be doing next, I'm not too sure, but have thoroughly loved this, and also thoroughly enjoyed the 2 years in Kenya. But that is that's a 6-hour campfire chat over a week to get through all the tales from Kenya and Tanzania. They're 2 incredible countries.
But I think we're lucky to have found you, because over the years it's been hard to find a presenter that just can slot in and just be like you are, just because it's like you've done this so much before, and you were just so comfortable with it.
Well, that's very kind, Mark. Thank you very much.
It's going to be sad to be parting our ways at the end of the month. But I hope, well, only for this we are.
Temporarily, hopefully.
Yeah. No, but I think being kindred spirits that we managed to sort of connect in ways. I think we will be in touch for a long time.
Certainly. I'm going to come and stay at your house in
you
Timbavasi.
Definitely are. But you're not allowed to come without that gorgeous girlfriend.
She'll be certainly in tow.
Good. And we'll have a good few nights around the fire there.
I'd love that.
Yeah.
I really would.
Yeah. I can show you the Mapani fell.
Yes. I would love to go for a stroll through your neck of the woods. I'm sure you'd have a lot of tricks up your sleeve after all the years you've spent there. I mean, you've known that property for
longer than you've been alive.
Yeah. So.
Well, no, I'm sorry to say that. That's really presumptuous. But yeah,
it's true.
Well over 40 years now.
Crazy. That's awesome.
You're not 40 yet.
Not nearly, but not quite.
So, yeah,
okay, but thanks. Yeah, and thanks for that question, Katie. It was a good one. Alex, any more?
We've been lucky to have found you. So maybe next time, maybe after the end of January, if we have another project coming up, maybe we'll try and snare you away from Nikki.
Well, I certainly would love to get back out here.
How's our sausages looking? Oh, he's listening to the radio again. Okay.
A question from, I think it's Caroline in potentially South Africa. And good evening, welcome to the Fireside Chat. This is a question I'll give to Mark. And Caroline's asking what the effects of building dams are on the environment? Very good question.
Thanks, Scott. So, what the effects of building dams are? Well, the effects vary. I'm going to avoid using a word that I... Okay, bingo's not happening tonight. The effects vary. I can't help it. It depends. In some places where there are fences, where some of the game ranches and some of the game farms are fenced in, and they have limited movement for the animals, it's vital to provide water for them. And you can do that through various different means. You can either dam up a drainage line and collect enough water through that drainage line from a single wet season that will last through the wet season, or you could put in a windmill, or you could put in a submersible pump after you've sunk a borehole, and you could physically pump water to troughs or water holes, that kind of thing. That becomes quite costly. There are solar pumps nowadays, but I guess the point is that under certain circumstances it's vital, because animals can't migrate or can't move seasonally, to permanent water areas in the dry season where temporary water or temporary pools have dried up after summer, where they can't move. It's vital that landowners or reserve owners or ranch owners provide water for them. On the other hand, in an environment like this, which is a very wide, very broad area, we're talking about millions and millions of acres of natural bushveld, that at some time in the past some of these areas were fenced in, and they were affected by that very syndrome, or rather scenario, of being fenced in and being micromanaged. Where these dams have existed over years, what can happen is that instead of I'll leave it. Instead of the seasonal movement that animals might take to find the more permanent water sources, like the permanent rivers and the larger natural water holes that have occurred over the year, or created over years and decades, centuries, providing an artificial water source is likely to keep animals in an area in the dry season when the pressure of those animals' presence can denude or degrade the environment, because animals would rather stay close to water than have grazing, browsing. So you might find a place where you're providing a dam and you're providing water, but the surrounding habitat can't really support the animals that stay there for the water, and in that sense those are times when making a man-made dam can be detrimental to the environment.
Yeah. There's another kind of example or theory that's also an interesting one, and that is that by creating a water hole, you allow animals that typically wouldn't necessarily always be there to be in that area, and that may attract increased concentration of predators, and that increased concentration of predators may then prey on animals that would typically find themselves in areas with less predators, because they are in more harsh, dry areas where prey is not abundant, and therefore may not have evolved as effectively to escape from predators. So I think the sable is one example of that, where that theory comes into play.
Well, I think the other perfect example of what we're seeing here, the wildebeest population. Wildebeest will find, if there's open grassland, it's one thing, but if there's open grassland with a water source, they will stay. But I think over time we've seen, and I think there are studies being done on it now, especially with the airstrips, how the wildebeest populations, especially here in the Sabi Sand, have been decimated because they're compelled to stay. They feel compelled, or they find it compelling to stay in an area that is close to water, as long as there's a little open patch of grassland.
Yeah.
And the lion know how to hunt them on that tiny little patch of grassland, that eventually the lion will wipe out herd after herd after herd, and a herd will be wiped out and just another herd will move in, and they'll suffer the same fate, which is pretty much what you're saying, is that it puts predator pressure on an area where suddenly there shouldn't be that much predator pressure.
Yeah.
So all in all, it's I don't want to use the word interfering, but it's modifying the habitat, and it is creating an artificial sense of security for animals that ordinarily would not maybe stay in that area over particular seasons when they would normally be moving away. And that allows the environment or the immediate habitat to recover while they're not there. And at the same time, by them not being there, the predator population doesn't doesn't intensify the way that it has perhaps proliferated as a result of all the artificial water points. But a lot of these water points, a lot of these dams stem back to the time when there were fences here, when the Sabi sand was self-contained, and in fact even before then, in the days before the Sabi sand became the Sabi sand, when there were individual fences. And I can even show you tomorrow on drive, we can see some of the marula trees around this very open area that once held fences, where instead of putting in fence posts, fences were wrapped around, or wire was wrapped around the mapani, rather the marula trees as fence posts. And we can still see the scars today where those fences used to stand. And we're talking about probably 50 odd years ago or more.
Alex, please go again with that question.
But over time, all of this is going to disappear, and especially since these private reserves are now part of the Kruger National Park, there is a lot of the management responsibility that falls on the Kruger National Park. And I suppose by the same token, the Kruger National Park has a lot of say in what the private reserves do, because the Kruger Park, or rather the National Parks Board, or the National Parks of Southern Africa, want to manage the area in a greater ecological sense, rather than the small micromanaging that happens on individual private properties, and then a different type of management that would occur in the Kruger. Excuse the hand gestures. But it's one environment, it's one habitat, or there might be micro-habitat, but it's one big national park. And it requires management on a much larger scale. That a lot of the dams that have been damaged and washed away in the floods of 2012 and 2013, those very dams are not allowed to be rebuilt because they did alter things so much. And a completely different view of the management of the wildlife, which unfortunately does need to take place, because essentially on the edges of every wildlife area you do have human habitation, or you have human settlements and things, and so it's necessary to some extent to keep the two separated, because animals and human conflicts are not the greatest things to have to deal with.
A question from Chris in California, asking whether you enjoy getting the screen captures from all the viewers, and I know I certainly do.
Oh no, I love it. I love it. I mean, I think one of the greatest screen captures for me just recently was when I had that magnificent big Ellie bull feeding on that marula. Or he found a mushroom. I still can't identify it. I've looked through my mushroom book, and there's nothing in my mushroom book that mentions a mushroom that's got to be bigger than a human's head. So I guess I'm still looking for that, and I guess I'll find it. But he was a tall Ellie, and he was standing so close to the marula tree that I was able to leave the vehicle and then go and stand where he had stood after he left. So that, and the screen caps, wonderful how people did different sort of things. Some people just put the two together, and that was great, because you could draw your own conclusions based on how high I was versus how tall he was. But there were some who actually drew a line at a certain level of the tree where the top of my hat was and where the bottom of his tusk was.
Okay.
But there was the odd photograph where somebody actually cut and pasted, sort of did a Photoshop of me standing almost, and I only reached sort of his bottom lip. I mean, that's how tall he was, sort of the bottom of his tusk, and he still had another whole me's length above to his shoulder. So he was probably a good 12 feet at the shoulder.
Crazy.
So I do love the screen caps. I just have to say that sometimes personally, I get a lot of screen caps of the same thing, and it would maybe crowd my page if I let all of them sit on my page. So some people might be upset that I mightn't hide one or two of those posts. But sometimes
nothing personal.
Nothing personal at all. I will gladly accept and have them on my page. But when there are a lot of them, I'm gonna sadly choose whose is the best, I guess, or which one came in first to post that on, or to allow that on my feed. Otherwise.
But we are extremely lucky, and one thing that I've thought about since I've been here regarding all the screenshots, and simply the fact that we're getting filmed the whole time, we're very lucky in that we will have lots of footage to look back on.
Very much so.
When we're old one day. So
well, no, for your kids.
Yes, exactly. And all those screenshots are also all part of those special
I like
stories
those,
that will help trigger our memories.
Yeah, I like those collages.
Yeah.
That get made. Sort of it kind of
summary,
sums up the whole drive, the best things in the drive.
Well, yeah, thank you very much, Chris. We do love them, so keep them coming. And now we've got a question from Ellen. Evening, Ellen. Ellen's asked, I may have got it wrong, but I think I've got the gist right, asking why some bull animals or male animals will get kicked out of a herd when they're young, whereas others are tolerated. And she said, for example, wildebeest and elephants. So my initial answer to that is that most males will inevitably move off from their herd, whether they're chased out by their mother or their fathers or other males that may be becoming dominant. Typically the men do move off at some stage, especially when they are becoming sexually mature. So that's a critical thing to factor into the equation, as well as depending on when they do become sexually mature, and it varies between different animals obviously. It's usually then that they would be chased out, and that's nature's way of preventing inbreeding. It's a necessity.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the primary thing, is that it prevents males from mating with either mothers or sisters or relatives. It is different though, being a matriarchal society with elephants, and it's not so much elephants that are chased out as much as they leave. But in a lot of the male-dominated societies that we have, bull-dominated societies, they do get physically chased out, because there is no way that a young male can mature, because all of the females probably going to be related, well, at least his mother and sisters, but a lot of the females will have the same genetic pool, so it's vital that, as Scott says, that it does mix up things a little bit. Mixing it up, I guess, it's just what makes animals be able to survive as a species. It's more vital to the survival of the species than it is to the individual, really.
The ear tap signal means I'm ready for another question. Our little secrets. The question has just come through from Tom. Good evening, Tom, and welcome. Tom has asked
Tom.
how much leopard cubs rely on their mothers' training for hunting, and whether, without their mother's help and training, would they be able to survive?
Well, I think leopard are probably at a far greater advantage as far as that is concerned, being able to survive without too much training from their mothers. I mean, leopard are predominantly instinctive hunters. I mean, you know what it's like. Leopard cubs will chase butterflies and grasshoppers and lizards, and right from a very young age, more so than, say, cheetah, because cheetah, on the other hand, it's more important for them to actually see what mum is doing, and more of what cheetah learn, or rather more of cheetah's upbringing is about learning how to do things. And a lot of that has got to do with the hunting method, and that in itself has got a lot to do with the habitat that they live in. A leopard lives in relatively thick bush, and they hunt in thick bush. The leopard's hunting method is stalking and pouncing. Ambush. So a leopard can't really afford to have a cub tagging along, because as we've seen, how many times you've seen lion cubs just mess up the hunt, or even when a leopard cub is there, also that tail goes up and the prey sees it, or the cub will sit up and the ears will go up and they want to see what mom's going to hunt, and that doesn't really lend itself well to learning a good lesson. So to a large extent, if you look at one end of the scale of the large cats, the leopard is very much an instinctive hunter, and from a very, very young age, because of the density of the bush they live in, a leopard's got to learn how to chase things from a very young age. Cheetah, on the other hand, they live in the open plains. It's possible for them to watch every time, and they do. Mom sits them down on the edge of the open area, and they literally watch her hunt. And it's very, very evident when you see generations of cheetah how much the cubs actually take in from their mom and almost mimic the way mom taught them how to hunt. I mean, I've seen then sort of southern or southwestern part of the Sabi Sand, how cheetah taught her cubs how to hunt, how to chase warthog into the fence,
Really?
that western fence. And when they left mom, and I managed to watch this throughout their lives, or most of their life, when they were cubs going into sub-adulthood, and then eventually leaving mom, how they then also started chasing warthog into the fence line. And you hear stories of cheetah who have taught their cubs to hunt baby giraffe or wildebeest or things like that in Namibia.
Really?
Or Gemsbok. So for cheetah, it's very much a learned thing, and it's vital that they do, because they're able to be a part of the hunt from a distance, so that they're not going to interfere in the hunt, because that is how cheetah hunt. They hunt with speed, they hunt in open areas, and it is possible for her to park her cubs off and watch the hunt and teach them that way. In fact, that's something that is a really wonderful discussion, is actually that very process, that teaching process that requires one step after the other for the mother to teach the cubs. It's a very harsh process, because they have to teach the cubs what is prey, then they have to teach the cubs how to open the prey, then they have to teach them how to catch the prey, because they can't teach them how to kill it without teaching them how to catch it. And there's that discrepancy in time where they know what it is they need to eat, they know how to feed on it. They might not know how to kill it first, but they know that when they catch it, they know how to feed. And so there's that really, really awkward moment when you're with cheetah cubs and they do catch their first kill, that they don't really know how to kill it yet, or they don't know that they need to. And that's a little process that's just an added thing that they need to learn. After they catch it, they need to learn to kill it. Leopard, on the other hand, they just go straight in for the kill. There's no process like that at all. There's no step-by-step process. Lion is kind of an in-between cheetah and leopard, in that lion are very much instinctive. The cubs as well, lion cubs will chase after things, and they will practice, because they're social, they will practice all the killing maneuvers on each other when they're growing up. But the one thing that they have to learn is they have to learn the cooperative hunting abilities that are required within that pride, and also finding their niche within the hunting strategy that the lion uses. Because you've got to remember that they're using different strategies for different terrain, different habitat, different prey that they're hunting, and that is all governed by the oldest female, the alpha female, and her sisters or the accompanying females, and their strategies. The cubs have to learn how to, that's their learning curve, is learning how to fit in with the hunting strategy. But they also learn very quickly, through a little bit of instinct, what it is that they need to hunt and what it is that they need to kill and how to eat it. And I think it's those processes that might help explain why it is relatively safe for us to be in an open vehicle, because we're never part of that process.
Yeah. We fit into a strange little gap.
We do, until we're on foot.
Exactly, on foot is another story.
But then again, they don't really ever chase us, hunt us down and feed on us, so they're never really passing on that information that we are food and we are part of the prey. I think we've just been part of the danger, part of the other side of things.
Yeah. Okay, we've got another question through from Donna in Ohio, and Donna in Ohio is asking us to let her know about the different species of vultures that we get in South Africa, and I guess anything else interesting we may know about vultures.
Okay. Well, I've been talking, you talk.
Well, in this immediate area, that we're in, there are the lappet-faced vulture, starting with the biggest, white-headed, the Cape Griffon, the white-backed, and the hooded. So there's 5 different types that we get here, and they all kind of fit into, there's 3 kind of different weight categories of vultures, I guess you could break it up into. You get the heavyweights, and those are the white-headed and lappet-faced, and then the middleweight, which are the Cape Griffon and white-backed, and then you get the flyweight or lightweight, which are the hooded vultures. And they all, because of their different sizes, have slightly different roles in the cleaning up of carcasses, and that is their role in the ecosystem, to get to all the little bits of meat that once the lion and leopard may have finished with the kill, the hyena may come in, and thereafter there may be little bits that neither of those predators could have got to, and only the vultures can clean up. So hugely important animal in the nutrient cycle out here and making sure that nothing goes to waste. So yeah, those are the 5 different types we get here. There also are the palm nut vulture, which is an interesting one.
It's almost like a vegetarian vulture.
Well, then you go give the vegetarian vulture speech.
It's also known as the vulturine fish eagle. It's very white and it's got sort of black dark upper wing covers. Known as the vulturine fish eagle, but it is a vulture, and it mostly feeds on the fruits of some of the palm. Well, the palm nuts.
The raffia palm, I think.
The raffia palm and the dooms as well.
Yeah.
The young dooms. Very seldom does it feed on anything else. It does feed on. I've known them to scavenge off of fish eagle kills.
Okay.
Up in Sulu, where we had a few palm nut vultures, and I've seen palm nuts on the coast of East Africa. I know that northern KwaZulu-Natal, there's some palm nut vultures.
There is a good place to see them. Cozy Bay, that's also, I guess, northern KwaZulu-Natal is where I've seen them. And then I saw them quite a lot in Katavi National Park in Tanzania. Okay. And on
Which is just north of Sulu anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And then on Lake Tanganyika, quite a few there. And there was a lot of raffia palms.
Yeah, I didn't get to Lake Tanganyika. Sadly, I didn't get to much of the lakes, other than all the lakes in Sulu.
Okay.
There's the other vulture. That's a very different and important vulture.
Well done, I'd forgotten about it.
The lammergeier.
Yes, or the bearded vulture.
Or the bearded vulture.
Is another term.
Do you know that there's a population in Austria?
I didn't have a clue.
And they're the same as ours. And
really?
Somehow the populations are connected.
Okay.
But the lammergeier or the bearded vulture is quite a unique vulture in that it's the only vulture that can actually grasp with its talons. And what they do is they actually take bones and they fly very, very high, and they drop bones onto rock to crack the bones so that they can get to the marrow. None of the other vultures are able to actually grasp things with their talons.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever their nesting material, whatever it is that they need to take back to their nest, is carried in the beak.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing. But I'm glad, interesting how you put it, because I've never really thought of it that way. I've always considered the vulture stacking, and I've never considered the heavyweights and the medium weights and the lightweights. And if you have to think of it the way I describe sometimes the vulture stacking is that your heavyweights are the very heaviest vultures, and they fly at a very high altitude. Mm-hmm. And they're not necessarily looking for a kill at all. They're only looking for the medium weights, who are in much greater numbers, who are circling and flying in the thermals below them, because the heavyweights are flying at maybe 5,000 feet at least.
Yeah, you don't see them nearly as much as the others circling.
And they're waiting for all these groups of other vultures that are flying 3,000 feet below them at about maybe 1,000 to 2,000 feet, and they're keeping their eye on those vultures, who in turn are keeping their eye on the lightweights, who are flying at only maybe 200 feet. The hooded vulture that doesn't even soar, it doesn't fly in thermals, it just flaps around from one area to another. If anything, you must have seen hooded vultures actually following predators.
Yeah.
Even on the hunt, and up in Sulu and in parts of East Africa, I've found hooded vultures permanently with a pack of wild dog, individual vultures that would just wake up with the wild dog, move with the wild dog all day, because they knew that if the dogs didn't catch anything, at least they could engage in coprophagia, which is eating feces.
Which is what you do when you're at the bottom of the vulture food chain.
I guess it is. But also the one maybe we can just expand on this, the whole lightweight heavyweight thing, is that look at the size of the not only the size of your hooded, but the size of its beak.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very narrow beak, and it's there for eating the really soft parts of a carcass. It's flying at only 200 feet. It's going to be one of the first birds to arrive at the scene of a crime, so it's going to be able to get to the soft parts quickly before the medium weights come in, because when they do, the Cape Griffon and the white-backed vultures, when they start coming in, they're going to completely overwhelm the small hooded vultures. And even they are going to be slightly limited in what they can do, because when the big white-headed and the leopard-faced vultures come in, it's a completely different story. They come in and they mantle the prey. They come in with a 7-foot wingspan and completely dominate. But there is also one bird that comes in that's not a vulture, and that's the marabou.
Uh-huh.
That also can dominate and intimidate even the heaviest weights of the leopard-faced vulture.
Yeah, I saw a few marabou at Manyeleti the other day, which is great, because
Really?
I hadn't seen them for long. Just two circling up, and they caught a thermal and
You remember the days when we used to see marabous? I mean, we used to see them almost on every kill, or any buffalo kill we would have marabous.
Yeah, it's
But,
strange.
well, I think one of the things is that there are a lot of rehabilitation centres just west of us, and they provide an incredible service. So, not detracting from the norm, or it's not a derogatory thing at all, but vulture restaurants are things that have turned up over the last 20 or 30 years because of a decline in vulture numbers. And the decline in vulture numbers is because the increase of farming and agriculture has taken out a lot of the natural habitat and a lot of the natural cycle of things, leaving carcasses and bones. And even with farming practices these days, farmers don't like to leave dead cattle or dead sheep or dead animals around their farms. They remove them. And however they dispose of them, I don't know. But what that has done is it's forced vultures in the past, and especially and particularly the Cape vulture, which has made the Cape vulture quite vulnerable, is it has forced the vultures to turn to bits of porcelain or plastic or anything white that has looked like bone. And since the Cape vulture is a kind of vulture that nests on the edges of cliffs and on rocky ledges, the calcium deficiency in chicks only really manifests itself when these chicks are ready to fly, and they jump off of a cliff with wings that are not really fully developed because the calcium levels are low, and virtually their wings just fold up on them and they plunge to their deaths. It's been quite frightening. I mean, talking about many decades ago. And to combat that and to try and rebuild vulture populations, many farmers and many private landowners have turned to creating what we call vulture restaurants. And that is obtaining carcasses from farmers and physically breaking up bones for the vultures to increase their calcium intake to assist with the breeding programs. And they've been wonderful things. Unfortunately, when it comes to things like marabou stalks, they're such opportunists. They don't really go much further than a lot of these vulture restaurants, and they somehow pick up on the regularity of carcasses appearing. And that's one of the reasons, I'm pretty sure, why we don't see so many marabous and vultures, for that matter, out here. Because we're sort of pretty close to the edge of the reserve, where there are a bunch of these rehabilitation centres further out.
That is a good point, Mark. Indeed. Well, folks, that is a wrap, I think, for this evening's Fireside Chat. Just one last little question that was from Dawn. Good evening, Dawn. Dawn was wondering what we were cooking, and they're just a beef sausage. They should be tasty. They look golden brown
good
and delicious. So we shall see,
and
we'll enjoy them. And thanks very much to the two cameramen and Alex in control, and to all the viewers and Mark. Well done. Another good day, another good week. Yeah.
We're looking forward to a new one.
Yeah. Well, there we go.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for setting up. Thanks to the guys behind the scenes. Is that Brian and the Thumb and Wim and Alex in final control. And hopefully Romeo will be back tomorrow.
Yes.
Young Jason.
Yes, exactly. Look forward to seeing him again.
He had a day of family.
Cool. Well, all the best from us. And
we're going to see you tomorrow.
Yeah, it's myself tomorrow. Only one vehicle out in the morning. Mark needs to catch up on some sleep.
No, I don't. I need to go and fix a wheel because
Alex
got a puncture today.
But yeah, it's just myself out in the morning, but both of us in the afternoon, and we will see you then.
Yes. Love you lots. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye, Scott.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.